Hey, welcome to the next episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series, the show where we take mocks from the community, have a look at them, talk a little bit about them, give you some tips and advice to inspire you to build some cool stuff in the future. So today, this episode is going to be on TOA. And TOA are the race of biological, biomechanical beings portrayed as the heroes in the Bionicle universe. So each TOA's got this really cool elemental power and ability, combined with using a very powerful mask of power known as a Kanohi. And these enhance their abilities even further. But we all know what a TOA is if we're a Bionicle fan, or I hope we do at least. Remember too, if you want to submit some of your own mocks to the show, you of course can, but more on how to do that at the end of the episode. So, let's get ready and let's begin. But before we do, want to give a big shout out to Mr. Lego Loco. He's become a patron at the Matoran level. Thank you very much for your generosity. I really seriously appreciate it. And if anyone else is interested in becoming a patron, you can check the links in the description below. So let's begin. The first mock that we have today is by Diego Corridera and is called Kepaka TOA of Ice. So straight off, obviously it's a Kepaka revamp. Pretty cool. So if you're building a TOA, there's nothing wrong with picking one of your favorites from the Bionicle universe, whether that's G1 or G2, and then revamping them in a fun way, whether that's giving them a new flair, something unique, something different, or just building them in the way you want, or just kind of playing around and seeing what you can do with their concepts and their ideas. It's always something fun to kind of give a little bit of a go and just do. One of my favorite parts about this mock are the weapons that he's got. Straight off, that shield is a really simple, awesome design, just using that. I guess it's really a shield piece. I don't know what else you'd call that, but it's just, sort of one piece and then finding a couple ways to attach it there. It's really simple, but really effective and works quite nicely. But then we take a look at this weapon here and combining this Rakshi spike piece as well as the Kepaka Nuva sort of ice skatey blade pieces that he's got there. That's a surprisingly awesome combo. Those pieces flow so nicely into each other. And then it's even nicer to see it sort of all put together there through some of those brown connector pieces. And it creates a kind of nice looking kind of wooden hilt to that blade. And I think that's just really effective and really nice. It's kind of a nice way to add a little bit of a popping accent color there. And it makes a lot of sense too, I'm sure most sort of weapons and things like that have wooden hilts and things like that. So yeah, I think it's just a very nice little detail there. Overall, there's some lovely texture play throughout this entire mock. Very smooth, beautiful aesthetics. It's very kind of knight-like, very heroic, which is pretty common to see throughout any kind of TOA design, whether that's from the toys or from other people's custom-made TOA and things like that. So I think that's very nice to see. There's also a really interesting custom sticker or sort of custom printed part here. This could be a bootleg piece, I'm honestly not too sure, but he's sort of got this interesting dragon design here on one of the shoulder armor pieces there. Kind of cool. That's something to consider. On any mock, really, can you add a little custom sticker or print or anything like that onto a mock just to add a little bit of something extra to it and maybe tell a little bit of a story with it too. I think that's really cool. So overall, a really fantastic mock and great to see a revamp of one of the cooler Bionicle sets, Mr. Kepaka. Let's move on to the next mock, which is by Cameron and is called Shadow Lord Tahu. So that's something that a lot of Y-foals, T-foals, A-foals, whatever you want to call them, have been doing ever since early days of Bionicle, is making sort of edgelord, corrupt versions of TOA. Like you see a TOA of Light with a shadow arm, or kind of like Vakama in Web of Shadows, the Bionicle movie. He turns evil for a little bit, but then comes back to the good side. That's always been a little bit of an interesting trope that you've seen throughout any kind of TOA, and so I think this is a fantastic example of one of those mocks in that specific style, and it's something that you see quite often in the Bionicle community, so maybe that's something that you want to consider, building a corrupt version of a already existing Bionicle character, or maybe building a sort of evil, corrupt version of one of your own custom characters that you've made yourself. So how exactly has Cameron done that? He's done it in a few ways here. Obviously, there's a bunch of sort of spiked pieces throughout there, giving this kind of evil look. Overall, the color scheme is just very primarily black with some subtle highlights with the mask here and the flame arm. Very cool flame arm, by the way. Of course, some people can be a little confused about how that technique works. If you get some of the older fire pieces, some of the newer variants don't have it, they have a little tiny notch on the very edge of the fire piece. There's two of them, and you might sort of not really know what that little notch there is for. Well, as you can just sort of see here on the flame pieces on the arm here, those notches actually attach into one of the little crevices on the other flames there, and so you can kind of layer them in a fun way to get this awesome sort of flowing effect with the fire there. So if you've got a bunch of the old fire pieces like that, you can easily do that. It's a very simple, very easy technique. But like I was saying, managing to achieve this evil sort of look, it's cool that he's primarily just black, but he's got this really beautiful mask that really pops on that kind of black backdrop there. Now this of course is a prototype mask, a bit of a rarer misprint here, kind of giving this trans clear and then pop of marbled red throughout it, and that in itself almost looks kind of corrupt. It's kind of like, you know, Taho's original mask has been sort of, the colors changed, it's been infected in some way, and that kind of lends itself to that sort of awesome kind of corrupt effect. And there's a few Bionicle masks that we have that have come out in actual sets that sort of have similar effects to that on it, or if you're lucky enough to have some kind of misprint, maybe you can use that as a sort of, yeah, corrupt style mask. Who knows? See what you can play around with. Also, we were just talking about that really clever hand design, using all those flames kind of coming up of his hand, kind of looking like he's a bit like Blaziken or something. He's got this kind of cool fire attack kind of coming out of his arms. But it's a really simple connection there, simply on those Exoforce arms to make the fingers there. He simply attached some of those claw pieces and then attached the fire going out of it. It's a very simple connection, but it works really, really nicely. And that's something you could achieve on any mock, really. It's relatively simple, but creates a fantastic looking result. I'm also really interested by the foot design on this mock, using these fancy schmancy Hero Factory Bionicle G2 foot pieces here, and then instead of angling the claws down, you actually angle them going up, and it kind of almost creates this kind of hooved effect. I don't know, it just looks kind of more slightly evil, slightly abnormal, something you wouldn't see on a typical Toa or something like that. It's just really effective and creates a kind of more sinister effect. It's very nice. Also really cool to see these Wenawa Hordika parts here being used as the thighs. It's just a very effective mask use, kind of nice piece used there. I really like it. One final thing I really like on this mock is the torso design here, using the tumor mask here to kind of shape the waist and then sort of moves up into the kind of rest of the upper torso there. It kind of creates this really unique look that I think was very common and key to Bionicle as a whole, because you saw it very often in the Toa Mata as well as the Toa Nuva. Their chest designs kind of had this sort of three-axle kind of piston design, and this kind of mimics that. Sort of the mouth of the tumor mask is that major piston, and then you've got these sort of two side pistons that kind of help hold up the torso. And yeah, there's something very kind of quintessentially Bionicle about that. And I really like that. I think that's just always a nice kind of addition you can put on any mock, really. It's really cool to see. So awesome work, Cameron. Let's move on to the next mock, which is by the Mug Bearer and is called Team Avotai. So something that Mr. Mug Bearer is so fantastic at is he makes a lot of awesome digital renders of his mocks. He builds digitally, he even does some commissions as well, which is awesome. So if you're interested in him digitally building a mock and then him sending you a few pictures of it and stuff like that, he can of course do so. But besides the point, he makes some fantastic Bionicles and is an expert, in my opinion, at making some brick-built masks. They look fantastic, and these three mocks are a great example of how awesome those designs are. So of course this is a Toa team, and obviously throughout pretty much every single Bionicle set there's been some kind of Toa team that the Toa have been assigned to. And many a Bionicle fan in their time has made their own custom Toa teams or added to canon Toa teams, all sorts of fun stuff like that. And it's always something to consider is, you know, maybe you want to make a cool Toa team, build 6 or more or less of a specific Toa team and just have fun doing that. And of course there's a lot of ways to approach that. Either you can do very contrasting different designs, you know, Han Solo is very different to Luke Skywalker, but they fit so nicely together in a team. And so you can create, you know, very vastly different characters with very different color schemes, but they work very nicely together. Or you can create very similar characters. Perhaps you want a team purely comprised of Fire Toa, and all of them are sort of slight different variations on how to build a cool Fire Toa. So you never know, there's all sorts of fun ways to play around with it. And definitely something that I recommend is to kind of look into various character designs from teams, from TV shows or movies, things like that, and pay attention to the color schemes that they've used on each of those individual characters, because the color schemes on all their costumes are very deliberate. All the colors complement each other in some way, so that when they get all those cool group shots together, they all kind of complement each other. No one's kind of, you know, it's not like everyone on the team is wearing black and then suddenly one guy's wearing pink and it's just sort of this weird outlier there. Everyone's kind of complementing each other in some way. So yeah, pay attention to some of those color schemes, and maybe you can mimic some of those in Lego form when you're building your Toa team. And then that way there's a nice sense of cohesion throughout the team and they seem, well, like a team. So we briefly spoke about these custom masks before, but let's go into a little bit more detail about them. Cool to see all sorts of unique pieces here. Now, some of them aren't necessarily possible if you were to build them in real life just because of the colors, but you can still actually achieve that head design more or less, even if you sort of played around with some different part usages and stuff, or different color pieces and stuff like that. You could still achieve a very fantastic, realistic looking custom mask like these three here. And some pieces of note are some of these awesome kind of grill slope pieces, other grill plates, things like that. These fancy new sort of, I don't quite know what you'd call them, but these new tile pieces that kind of have that smoother edge on the one side instead of just being a square. Kind of each mock there has used that to kind of form the mouth, and it looks really cool. Speaking of really cool as well, some of the weapons on all of these mocks are really fantastic. Sort of this sword here in its little sort of sword carrier thingamajig. These very simple blades here that work very nicely. And then, of course, this really awesome axe hammer design here that this Toa in the middle's got is very cool. Very nicely done, using some of those armor pieces there to kind of form the edge of that hammer. Looks really, really cool. And one of my favorite things that Mr. Mugbearer is very, very good at is building cloth elements, but not actually using any cloth elements to do so, mainly using system parts to achieve that. So for example, we see a little bit of that on the waist and the shoulder here of this blue Toa, so he's kind of got a pauldron and a sort of little waistcoat thing there, which is really effective, simply using a bunch of clip pieces and some Nexonite parts and some tiles and things, really nicely done. But my favorite cloth piece here is on this red Toa with this, again, very simple design, using a lot of mixel joints, slopes, curved slopes, all sorts of things like that. And overall, he's achieved a very nice, almost sort of samurai monk kind of looking cloth element here, which is actually nicely complemented by the foot design here, how he's sort of got these nice sandal kind of things there on the feet. Very, very clever idea. So yeah, a lot to love about these mocks. Very, very nicely done. Let's quickly move on to the bonus mock, which is by Purple Boy Anuru, and is called Turbo. So obviously with any mock you make, you can always add any kind of story that you want. You can go super in-depth with that, into delving into the character. And like some AFOLs, you can have a character that's lasted you years. You've made the character since your childhood, and you've continued to build and play with him well into your adult and teenage years. And you can really form some nice attachments to your characters, and that's something really magical with LEGO as a whole. And something that I think is really kind of cool about that is you can go really customized with any of them. You can really express yourself with them. And I think that's something that's kind of note with this mock, you know, having that kind of custom mask in there and stuff. You know, maybe you want to go that route and make some custom pieces and go even more custom and in-depth into that character and really make them your own in any kind of unique way that you want. And I think custom painted parts or masks is a really decent way of doing that. And also too, how much cooler does that mock look using this mask in that unique paint job there? It blends so well with this really unique and dynamic color scheme, which having these two very bold colors really lends itself to the fact that, you know, this mock has wheels on its feet. So obviously it's this sort of kind of racer guy having this sort of dynamic color scheme like that. Gives a very sort of fast, agile look to it, and everything kind of flows well and nicely together into that. I kind of see this little sort of awesome story of a, you know, he's maybe like a racer, kind of like a, you know, in this universe, they don't race in cars, they race with themselves and have their wheels on their feet and do that. And so, yeah, he's got this really awesome color scheme that kind of makes him look faster, you know, it's kind of like his sporting colors or something like that. It's really cool. I like that a lot. And honestly, I think that's something that I really love on mocks that use it, and it's not something you see every day, is doing that, adding the wheels onto the feet there. You can create some really unique designs with that. You know, you can have really large wheels or really small wheels like this mock, and can create some really effective designs. So I think that's definitely something to maybe play around with in the future. Also, something of note here, the hand design on this mock using these cool new kind of clip pieces with the lightsaber connection piece on the end there, where you can insert a lightsaber rod. That's such a beautiful new piece, and it's a nice substitute if you want to have fingers on a mock and not use those specific Exoforce arm finger pieces there. You can use those instead, and they're a little bit smaller too, so if you're building a bit of a smaller mock, it kind of lends itself to that, which is very nice to see. Anyway, that's it for 4 fantastic Toa designs in this episode. Be sure to check the links in the description to all the mocks that you saw today and give those guys some love because they are some fantastic builders. Also, while you're there, be sure to check the links to my social media and consider checking out my Patreon page. Also, if you're interested in submitting some of your own mocks to the show, you of course can. You can do so by sending some pictures and some information to the following email address that you are seeing on your screen right now. If you want to be sure to copy that link, or that email rather, you can. It's in the description below. Anyway, that's it for this episode on Toa. Stay tuned next time for the next Bionicle Inspiration series, which will be out next week. See you then, guys. Happy building. Bye for now.